Chapter 15. "I didn't mean to hurt you last night," Catherine said nervously, her hands clasped at her waist. She stood in the center of the room, dressed as before, in a high-collared, ruffled white blouse and the heavy black skirt that went down to the floor. The same candles glowed on the small table and on the dresser. Leah suddenly realized that the candles in this room must burn but never melt. "I didn't mean to hurt you before," Catherine repeated, her expression serious and apologetic. "It's just that I hadn't touched anyone in so long. I forgot myself." "That's okay," Leah said uncertainly. "I think I overreacted. I got scared and—" "I won't do it again," Catherine interrupted. "My name is Leah," Leah told her, moving slowly into the room. "It's a pretty name," Catherine said softly, shyly. "You're very pretty. I like your hair. Such an interesting hairstyle." "Bangs?" Leah exclaimed. "Interesting." "I always wanted dark hair," Catherine said, sitting down in the hard-backed wooden chair by the table. "But your hair is beautiful," Leah insisted. "Watch what I can do with it," Catherine said, a spark of playfulness lighting her eyes. As Leah watched with a mixture of awe and fright, Catherine made her blonde hair grow brighter, brighter, until the golden curls seemed to throb and flash, sending rays of light twirling around the room. Then, just as quickly, Catherine's hair darkened, faded until it was as dark as the black velvet hair ribbon she wore, and all of Catherine seemed to grow dark and shadowy until she was only an outline, a suggestion, a dim presence. "Come back," Leah pleaded. Catherine reappeared, obviously pleased with herself. "There are some advantages to being a ghost," she said, smiling. "There are things it is possible to do without a body, and then there are things—" Her voice trailed off. "Would you like to come outside?" Leah asked, blurting out the words almost as a single word. She knew if she said them slowly, she would rethink them and not say them at all. "What?" Catherine's pretty face filled with surprise. "Would you like to leave the room? Come outside with me?" Leah asked, her heart pounding. Catherine's smile transformed her face. She jumped happily to her feet. "Yes!" she cried. "Oh, yes, yes! Thank you, Leah. I don't know how to thank you. You do believe in me, don't you?" "What?" It was Leah's turn to be thrown off guard by a question. "Believe in you?" "You do believe that I'm a ghost, and that I won't harm you?" Catherine asked eagerly. "Yeah, I guess so." Leah didn't really want to think about that. In fact, she didn't want to think about anything. She wanted to act. If she thought about it, she knew she'd turn back. "Where shall we go?" Catherine asked excitedly, clapping her hands together. "Where will you take me?" "To a friend's house," Leah replied. "A friend?" "Well, she isn't really a friend. Actually, she's an enemy, I guess you'd say." Catherine's face filled with bewilderment. "Her name is Marcy," Leah said, deciding to tell Catherine everything before they began. "I want to play a joke on her, scare her a little." "A little?" Catherine asked. "A lot," Leah corrected herself. Both girls laughed. "I'm beginning to understand," Catherine said, fussing with the tight collar of her blouse. "You want me to frighten Marcy." "Can you make things float?" Leah asked. "I can make myself float," Catherine told her. "Is that what you mean?" "No, like, if you disappeared and lifted that candle holder," Leah said, pointing. "Do you mean like this?" Catherine vanished from sight. A few seconds later, the candlestick appeared to lift off the dresser top and glide through the air toward Leah. "Yes, that's it," Leah cried happily. "That's perfect." Catherine reappeared then with a soft whoosh of air, standing beside Leah, the candlestick in her hand. "This could be fun," she said, smiling. "I've never haunted anyone before." "I want to convince Marcy that I have evil powers," Leah said, unable to suppress an eager grin. "I worked out this whole idea on my way home from school. This girl has been so awful to me. I just want to pay her back so she'll leave me alone." "I'll be happy to help," Catherine said, floating back across the room to replace the candlestick. "You just have to follow my cues," Leah said excitedly. "Make it appear that I'm making all kinds of strange things happen. I want to terrify Marcy out of her wits. I want to make her so frightened that she'll never dare to hurt me again." "She'll never hurt you again," Catherine repeated quietly to herself. She took Leah's hand and squeezed it gently. Catherine's hand felt so cold in Leah's. Cold as death, Leah thought, but she forced herself not to react. She didn't want to hurt Catherine's feelings. "I cannot believe you're taking me outside," Catherine said, floating up joyfully off the floor. "When can we go?" Leah glanced at her watch. "It's 5:15. Marcy is probably home right now. Let's go now, Catherine." "Yes," Catherine cried ecstatically. "Yes, now. She'll never hurt you again. Yes!" Catherine vanished from sight, startling Leah. She stared around the room, searching for her. "Catherine? Where'd you go?" Suddenly, Leah began to feel strange. At first, she felt dizzy. Then the dizziness became like a weight that pressed down on top of her head. "Catherine?" Leah felt the weight press its way down on her head, down her shoulders and chest, then down on her entire body, lower, lower. "I feel as if I weigh 1,000 pounds, she thought. But then suddenly she felt as if the weight had been lifted, and she became so light she might actually float away. Then she had the sensation of losing control, losing all control. "Catherine? What's happening?" Leah cried. "Help! Catherine! Stop! Please stop! Catherine! What are you doing to me?" Chapter 16. "Relax, Leah," said a silent voice inside Leah's head. "I can feel the tension in your body." "Catherine, where are you? What have you done to me?" Leah cried. "It will be fine," the voice inside Leah's head said mysteriously. You're inside me," Leah realized with horror. "Inside my brain." She was still standing in the attic room. At least, she thought she was standing. She couldn't feel her legs, she realized, or her arms, or anything. "Catherine has taken over my body," Leah thought. "I'm still inside, but I am no longer in control." "It will be fine," Catherine repeated. This time, the words came out of Leah's mouth, in Leah's voice. "Catherine, please," Leah pleaded. "I'm frightened. I feel so strange." "I'm frightened too," Catherine replied in Leah's voice. "I've never been outside before. I won't hurt you, Leah, I promise. And I'll separate myself from you when we reach Marcy's house. It doesn't hurt, does it?" "No," Leah admitted. "It just feels so strange. I feel so light, so weak, so out of control." "I'm sorry if it frightens you, but it would be impossible to travel any other way," Catherine said, speaking softly through Leah's lips. "It would take all my energy. I'm not strong enough to travel any distance on my own." "And you promise you'll get out of my body when we reach Marcy's?" Leah asked warily. "Of course," Catherine reassured her. "I am forever in your debt, Leah. You are so kind to invite me out. I don't want you to be frightened." Catherine's words calmed Leah. In a few seconds she was descending the ladder, a passenger in her own body. A few seconds after that, she had pulled on her down jacket and was walking toward Marcy's house. "Marcy lives on Hawthorne Drive, just a few blocks from here," Leah informed Catherine. "It's so beautiful out here," Catherine said. Leah's feet crunched over the carpet of brown leaves that covered the ground and sidewalk. The sun had already lowered, leaving only a few traces of pink and scarlet in a graying sky. The sweet and pungent aroma of burning wood filled Leah's nose. Someone down the block had a fire going. "Everything is so magical, more beautiful than I ever imagined," Catherine said. Leah could feel warm tears sliding down her cheeks. "I guess I usually take it all for granted," Leah admitted. They turned onto Hawthorne. Marcy's house was just a few houses down the tree-lined block. The houses here were rambling and old, in style not much different from the houses on Fear Street, only in better condition, the lawns carefully manicured and raked clean of leaves. "It's so exciting to be in a real body again," Catherine exclaimed. "To feel the air on my face, to feel the cold, just to feel." "I'm glad," Leah replied, with less enthusiasm than she had intended. "If Catherine likes being in my body so much, will she leave it when we get to Marcy's?" Leah wondered, her fear returning. "Will she keep her promise? What will I do if she refuses to leave?" "Here we are," Leah said as they walked up to the gravel drive. Marcy's house was white shingled, the shingles recently painted, with black shutters framing the windows, a sloping red roof on top. As they stepped onto the front porch, Leah began to feel strange. For a brief moment she felt again as if she weighed 1,000 pounds, and then she could feel the weight floating up, up, up from her body. She raised her arm. Leah was in control again. She felt perfectly normal. "Catherine?" she whispered. "I'm right beside you," Catherine, invisible, whispered back. "I'm so excited, Leah. This is the happiest day of my life." Catherine kept her promise, Leah thought with relief. I guess I really can trust her. She rang the doorbell. "Now let's see if we can ruin Marcy's day," she whispered. Despite her excitement, Leah was suddenly filled with doubt. "What am I doing here?" she thought. "This is crazy. Insane. I let my anger control me. I just wasn't thinking clearly. This can't work." But then she thought of Marcy in the hall at school, making up stories about her, and she remembered the two girls who snickered as she passed. Her doubts faded to the back of her mind. Leah rang the bell again. She heard rapid footsteps approaching from inside. The porch light went on above her head. Then the door was pulled open halfway, and Marcy poked her head out, surprise on her face. "What are you doing here?" Marcy asked coldly, her breath smoking against the evening air. I want to talk to you," Leah stammered. Marcy's coldness, her obvious hatred, made Leah want to shrivel up into a tiny ball and roll away. "I'm kind of busy," Marcy said, looking Leah up and down, her face showing her obvious disapproval. "Just a few minutes," Leah insisted, her anger returning, helping to restore her confidence. "I think we should talk about a few things." "Write me a letter," Marcy snapped, and she pushed the door hard to slam it. But the door didn't slam. It remained open a few inches. Marcy was pushing against it, but the door wouldn't close. She checked to see if Leah's foot was blocking it, but Leah was standing a foot back from the door. "Hey, what's going on?" Marcy cried out, confused. "The door is stuck." Catherine is doing a great job already, Leah thought, secretly pleased. She pushed past Marcy and stepped into the front hall, ignoring Marcy's hostile, suspicious stare. "There's a reason I live on Fear Street," Leah said darkly, raising her eyes to Marcy's. She had rehearsed that line all the way home from school. "What do you mean?" Marcy asked. The front door slammed shut behind Marcy. She jumped, startled by the noise. "What's with that stupid door?" Leah laughed, nervous laughter she tried to disguise as evil. "I want you to stop telling lies about me," she told Marcy, staring into Marcy's pale blue eyes. "What? Why would I ever talk about you?" Marcy asked scornfully. "Who are you, anyway?" "I heard you," Leah said, feeling surprisingly calm. "I don't know what you have against me, but I want you to stop." "Have a nice night, you know the way out," Marcy said, and started to move off. As she passed a hall table with a tall blue enamel flower vase on it, the vase suddenly floated up into the air. "Hey!" Marcy cried. She stopped short, her back against the wall, and raised both hands as if to shield herself from the flying vase. "I told you," Leah said, enjoying Marcy's being frightened. "There's a reason I live on Fear Street." "What do you mean?" Marcy cried, watching the blue vase descend back to its place on the table. "I have powers," Leah said. "You picked the wrong person to have as an enemy, Marcy." "Now, listen," Marcy started, but the coat closet behind her suddenly sprang open, and a khaki raincoat came dancing out, waving its arms, twirling rapidly. "No!" Marcy cried. "Stop it!" "I want you to stop," Leah said quietly, trying to keep a straight face. Catherine is great at haunting people, she thought. "This is all a stupid trick?" Marcy said uncertainly. The raincoat collapsed lifelessly to the floor at Marcy's feet. "Get out of here, Leah! Go on! Get out!" Marcy insisted, her back still against the wall, waving her finger at the front door. "Oh!" Marcy's mouth dropped open and she uttered a cry of terror, as her feet suddenly left the floor and she floated up 3 or 4 inches. "Wow," thought Leah admiringly. For such a little girl, Catherine is really strong. Marcy kicked and struggled. "Let go!" she shrieked, her face bright red, her eyes round with terror. Twisting her body and thrusting her elbows back against her invisible captor, she broke free and fell heavily to the floor. Panting, she scrambled to her feet. "Mom!" she screamed, pushing past Leah to get to the stairway. "Mom, help me!" Uh-oh, thought Leah. Maybe Catherine went too far. Maybe picking Marcy up was a bad idea. "Marcy, wait!" Leah called. Marcy was racing up the stairs, taking them 2 at a time, screaming hysterically, calling for her mother. Leah watched from down below as Marcy reached the second-floor landing, where a narrow balcony with a low railing stretched the length of the house. Doors opened off it. Marcy started to run down the balcony. "Mom!" she cried. Marcy's mother appeared from one of the bedrooms. "Marcy? What on earth?" Marcy was running toward her mother when suddenly, with a loud cry, she tripped and stumbled, grabbing at the wooden railing as she fell against it. The railing gave way with a sickening crack. As Marcy's mother and Leah cried out in horror and disbelief, Marcy plunged head first off the balcony, her hands frantically grabbing at air, grabbing at nothing, until, a second later, a second that must have seemed an eternity, she crashed to the floor below with a loud cracking sound, like that of an egg breaking. Chapter 17. "Oh no, oh no, oh no," Mrs. Hendricks was screaming over and over. Leah reached Marcy first. Marcy was lying on her back, her eyes open wide, staring lifelessly at the ceiling. Her head was twisted at an odd angle. One leg was pulled up behind her back, bent the wrong way. Leah, feeling for her pulse, leaned over Marcy and listened for her heartbeat. Then she pressed her hand under Marcy's nose to see if she was breathing. "Mrs. Hendricks, I don't think she's breathing," Leah shrieked. "Oh no, oh no, oh no!" Still chanting her horror, Mrs. Hendricks dropped down beside Marcy and cradled her daughter's head in her lap. "Call an ambulance! An ambulance!" she screamed. Leah rushed to the phone and, her hands trembling, pushed in 911. "Oh no, oh no, oh no!" Mrs. Hendricks was seated on the floor, rocking back and forth with Marcy's head in her lap. Marcy's legs still twisted behind her, bent the way no leg should bend. "She's gone. My baby is gone." She was still rocking back and forth, holding Marcy, when 4 paramedics and 2 young police officers arrived 10 minutes later. "It was an accident. A horrible accident," was all Mrs. Hendricks was able to say, before collapsing on the floor in tears. The paramedics swung into action, pulling out equipment from their bags, working feverishly, trying to shock Marcy back to life. But it was no use. She was dead. "Marcy and I were talking. Well, we actually had an argument," Leah told the police after the paramedics had called the family doctor for Marcy's mother. "Did you see her fall?" an officer asked, scribbling rapidly on his steno pad. "Yes," Leah told him, choking back tears. "She ran up the stairs. She tripped, I guess. She fell against a railing, and it broke, and she fell down here." The 2 officers stared down at the body, but Leah couldn't face her. More uniformed men arrived. Marcy's body was covered with a canvas tarp, and finally the coroner arrived. There were more questions, more furious scribbling in steno pads. A doctor arrived to help Mrs. Hendricks. "A horrible accident," she whispered, her face blotchy and puffy from crying. She glanced at Leah as the doctor led her up to her room. "A horrible accident." Was it an accident? Leah wondered, watching Marcy's mother being helped up the stairs. Was it an accident? Or did Catherine murder Marcy? That wasn't possible, was it? "Miss, I asked if you'd like us to drive you home," one of the officers asked impatiently. "Oh, I'm sorry." Lost in her thoughts, Leah hadn't heard him. "Yes, thank you." "Follow me," he said, heading for the front door. As she started to follow him, Leah felt the heavy sensation again. The weight pressed down from the top of her head and sank down through her chest and into her legs, until she was completely filled with the heaviness. Catherine had re-entered her body. "Catherine, I need to talk to you," Leah thought as she felt herself become almost weightless. "Catherine, did you murder Marcy?" There was no reply to Leah's thought. Catherine was a presence, but silent. "Catherine, it was an accident, wasn't it? I hated Marcy, but I never wanted her to die. Catherine, please tell me it was all a horrible accident." Silence. The nearly bare trees whirred by against the clear black sky. A few minutes later, the 2 officers helped Leah out of the back seat of their black and white and accompanied her to her front door. The porch light came on, and the door was pulled open immediately. "Leah, what's wrong?" her father asked. Leah rushed into his arms. "Oh, Daddy, something terrible happened," she cried. "A girl I know. She died. She died!" Leah, overcome with the horror of the afternoon, could feel herself growing heavier again for just a second, and then the weight floated up through her body, through her head, until it disappeared. Catherine had left her, most likely to return to the secret bedroom in the attic. Mr. Carson, his arms around Leah, searched the officer's face. "Your daughter is okay," one of them told him. "There was an accident. Her friend fell over a railing. It must have been a terrible shock for her." Leah allowed her father to lead her into the warmth of the house. She heard the front door shut behind them. Then she could hear the cruiser roar off down the street. "Leah, what on earth?" her mother exclaimed. "It was an accident," Leah blurted out, unable to stop the tears that began to pour down her cheeks. "It was just a horrible accident." She tried to eat her dinner, but the cold chicken just wouldn't go down, and the mashed potatoes tasted like paste. "I've never heard you mention this, Marcy," her mother said, sitting across from her, staring at her sympathetically. "She's just an acquaintance. I mean, was," Leah said. "You've been through a terrible experience," her mother said, reaching across the table and taking Leah's hand. "You can eat later. Why don't you go up to your room and lie down for a while?" "Thanks, Mom," Leah said appreciatively. She pushed back her chair and headed up the stairs. But she didn't go into her room. She listened in the hallway to make sure her mom and dad weren't observing her. Then she silently climbed the ladder to the attic. "I have to know," Leah thought, pushing the ceiling door away. "I have to know that it was an accident, that Catherine didn't murder Marcy. Because if she did murder Marcy, then I'm responsible. If she did murder Marcy..." Leah didn't want to finish this thought. It was freezing cold in the attic. feeling very uncomfortable. She turned on the yellow attic light, then made her way to the secret room. The door was closed. Without announcing herself, Leah turned the key and opened the door. Catherine was sitting on the bed, hands folded in her lap, as if she had been expecting Leah. A pleased smile crossed her face. "Catherine, did you push Marcy?" Leah asked without a greeting. A stern expression on her face, she stepped into the room and walked over to the bed, standing over Catherine. Catherine's smile didn't fade. She looked up mischievously at Leah, but didn't reply. "Catherine, answer me," Leah demanded impatiently, hands on her hips. "Did you push her? Did you murder her?" Catherine shook her head, her golden ringlets shaking with it. "It was a dreadful accident," she said, smiling up at Leah. "A tragic accident." "I don't believe you," Leah said angrily. "You pushed her, didn't you?" "You have no reason to say that," Catherine said in her teasing little girl voice. "You didn't see me." "You were invisible, Catherine. I want to know the truth." "I've told you the truth," Catherine insisted, looking past Leah to the half-open doorway. "No, I don't think you have," Leah said. "I really think you floated up those stairs and pushed Marcy." Catherine rose to her feet and stepped away from Leah. She moved to the dresser against the back wall, then turned to Leah, her back against the dresser. "It worked out very well for you, didn't it, Leah dear?" Catherine's tone, cold and hard, shocked Leah. Catherine's face hardened to match her voice. She was no longer the petite young angel. Suddenly, she was very old. "Well, admit it, Leah. It worked out very well for you. I helped you." "You helped me?" Leah was staring hard at Catherine, astonished by the transformation. "Yes, I helped you. And now it's time for you to help me," Catherine said, her face in shadow. "Help you?" Leah took a step back. "Now wait a minute, Catherine. I don't—" Catherine floated away from the dresser, across the room, until she hovered over Leah. "Yes, you will help me now," she said, her voice hard, her eyes cold, her features frozen in contempt. "No!" Leah shrieked and started to run, but the door slammed shut. Spinning around to face Catherine, she screamed at her. "What do you want?" "What do I want?" Catherine tossed her head back and laughed, scornful, bitter laughter. "I want to be alive again. But, Catherine, I want to touch things from inside a real body, Leah. I want to walk around, feel the ground, smell the air. But I can't do that for you," Leah wailed. "Of course you can," Catherine said, staring at Leah, needily, hungrily. "You have to let me in now." "What?" Leah didn't really believe what she was hearing. "You have to let me in now," Catherine repeated, hovering over Leah. "I helped you this afternoon. Now you owe me. But, Catherine—" Leah glanced over her shoulder at the door. It was shut tight. Catherine had done that. Maybe she had locked it too. There was no point in trying to run. But what could she do? "You have to let me in," Catherine said softly, her voice pure menace, pure cold menace. "I'm coming in to stay." "No," Leah pleaded. "Catherine, please." But Catherine had disappeared. And then, Leah could feel the pressure on top of her head, and she knew that Catherine was slipping inside her. Chapter 18. The first time Catherine had inhabited her, Leah hadn't known what was going on. She had felt the weight sinking through her body, had felt the new presence, and then had felt light again, light and out of control of her own body. But the experience had been so new, so terrifying, so completely bewildering, that Leah could only stand passively and let it happen. But now, as she felt her head grow heavy, felt the pressure begin to run down her back, she knew it was Catherine's invasion, and she tried her best to resist. Get out! 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 She screamed, and she concentrated with all her might, concentrated on keeping Catherine out, on keeping control of her own body. Out! Get out! She cried, her eyes shut tight. Concentrate! To Leah's surprise, it began to work. She could feel the weight lifting, feel the pressure lighten. Her head cleared. She kept her eyes closed, concentrating even harder, more resolutely. "Let me in, Leah," Catherine, invisible, whispered from close by. "You owe me, Leah. Let me in." "No!" Leah screamed, and, opening her eyes, turned and ran to the door. "Let me in, Leah. You can't resist me. I'm coming in." But Leah turned the knob and pushed. To her surprise, it opened easily. She darted out into the attic, slammed the door, and turned the key in the lock. "I did it," she thought. "I kept Catherine out. I forced her out." Leah slid down the ladder to the second floor before she realized she was trembling all over, trembling so hard her teeth were chattering. Calm down. but she couldn't stop trembling. "Mom!" she screamed, running frantically down the stairs. "Mom! Dad! Please! Help me!" They came running out of the den, both of them with open mouths, their faces filled with fear and concern. "You've got to help me!" Leah screamed, unable to stop the trembling. Her mother ran across the dining room and wrapped Leah in her arms. "Leah, what?" "It's a ghost," Leah murmured, pressing her face into the shoulder of her mother's soft sweater. "A ghost!" "Bring her into the den," Mr. Carson instructed his wife. "Leah, come lie down on the couch." "No!" Leah pulled away from her mother. "I don't want to lie down. I can't. There's a ghost in the house. She murdered Marcy, and I'm the one who let her out." "Leah?" her mother pleaded, her features pinched with worry. "Leah, you're very upset," her father said softly. "You've been through a terrible ordeal. Now, just come into the den and—" "No, I won't lie down," Leah insisted, knowing she was out of control, but unable to do anything about it. "Then at least come sit down and talk to us," her father said patiently. Leah sighed. "Okay." She followed them into the den and sat down on the edge of the brown leather couch. Her father clicked off the TV. Her mother stood in the doorway, supporting herself with a hand on each side of the doorframe. "What's the matter?" Mr. Carson asked, sitting down beside Leah on the couch. "There's a ghost upstairs," Leah began, trying to sound calm, trying to force her voice to remain normal. "A girl, in the attic, in the room behind the door." "The locked-up room?" her mother asked, glancing at her husband. "It isn't locked anymore," Leah confessed, looking down at the shaggy white throw rug at her feet. "I pulled off the boards, and I unlocked it." "You did? When?" her father asked, sitting very close. "Several nights ago. I thought I heard someone inside, so I pulled off the boards. I unlocked the room and found a ghost inside, a girl who was murdered in this house 100 years ago, and I let her out, and she deliberately pushed Marcy over the railing, and now she wants—" Leah's voice cracked. She stared at the rug. She couldn't continue. "You've been through a terrible ordeal today," her father repeated. "I don't blame you for being upset, but we have to try and keep a sense of reality here." "You don't believe me?" Leah cried, jumping to her feet. Her parents were exchanging worried glances, signaling to each other. "Leah, you're shaking all over," her mother said. "I'm going to find a doctor." "No," Leah cried. I don't need a doctor. I'm not sick." "But dear," Mrs. Carson said, "you're not making any sense." "I'm sure you just need to rest, Leah," her father said, motioning for her to return to the couch. "I'm sure you just need some time to get over what you saw. It was an accident, after all." "But that's what I'm trying to tell you," Leah shrieked, pulling at the sides of her hair in frustration. "It wasn't an accident. Catherine murdered Marcy." "Catherine?" her father asked, his forehead wrinkling in confusion. "The ghost!" Leah screamed. "The ghost in the room in the attic." "Leah, sit down," her father said firmly, standing up and pointing to the couch. "I really don't want to hear any more talk about a ghost." "Let me try to find a doctor," Mrs. Carson said, biting her thumb the way she always did when she was nervous. She started to leave the den. "Okay, I'll prove it to you," Leah said, still trembling. "I'll prove it to you." She grabbed her father's hand and pulled. "Come on, both of you." "You're taking us up to the attic?" her mother asked, following hesitantly. "I'm going to show you the secret bedroom," Leah said. "I'm going to prove to you that I'm not crazy, that there's a ghost up there." They climbed the stairs, past Leah's room, and stopped at the foot of the metal ladder, all three of them lifting their eyes to the trapdoor in the ceiling. "And if there is no ghost up there, will you let me call a doctor?" Mrs. Carson asked tentatively. "There is a ghost," Leah insisted. She climbed up the ladder as she had done so many times in the past 2 weeks, pushed away the wooden door, and lifted herself into the darkness of the attic. Her parents followed, Mrs. Carson first and then her husband. "It's so cold up here," Mrs. Carson complained. It took Leah a few seconds to find the light switch on the wall. She pushed it, and yellow light flooded the long, narrow room. Breathing hard, Leah led the way to the hidden room, and then stopped short with a loud, disbelieving gasp. The door was closed and locked. The boards were all in place, blockading the doorway, nailed sturdily over the door. Nothing had been touched. It all looked the same as it had the day they moved in. Chapter 19. Dr. Harrison clicked his bag shut. He straightened Leah's blanket, then smiled down at her through his wire-rimmed bifocals. "You'll be okay," he said, his face expressionless, businesslike. "You've got quite a fever, but we'll bring it down. Stay in bed a few days, okay? At least till the fever is gone." Feeling drowsy from the high temperature, Leah thanked the doctor. She turned her face into her pillow. They don't believe me about Catherine, she told herself bitterly. They think the fever was giving me hallucinations. Across the room, rain drummed against the twin windows. A strong wind drove waves of water against the glass, making the old window frames rattle. Leah could hear Dr. Harrison out in the hall, talking in hushed tones to her parents. She raised her head from the pillow and tried to make out what he was saying, but he was talking too quietly. A few seconds later, she heard the three of them go down the stairs. She heard the front door close as the doctor left. They think I imagined it all, Leah thought. Maybe I did. She looked up to see both of her parents enter the room, walking softly, almost tiptoeing. Still awake? Her father whispered. I feel very sleepy, Leah said, yawning. Dr. Harrison says the fever has broken, her mother said, biting her thumb nervously as she leaned over Leah, studying her as if seeing her for the first time. Stop looking at me like that, Leah said, wondering why her voice was so hoarse. You just need to stay in bed for a few days. You know, rest up, her father said. I feel like I could sleep for a week, Leah replied. Her mother leaned down and kissed her forehead. She smelled of oranges. Leah smiled and closed her eyes. A strong burst of rain from the windows made her open them again. Her parents had gone downstairs. She picked up Georgie from the foot of the bed and held him close. They think I'm crazy, Georgie, she told the stuffed tiger. As if in reply, Georgie's eyes began to glow bright red. No, Leah whispered and tossed the tiger to the floor. When she looked up, Catherine was standing beside the bed, bathed in the same harsh red light that had come from Georgie. Catherine, what are you doing here? Leah asked, feeling very groggy. How did you get down here? This is my room, Catherine replied, smiling down at Leah. The red glow faded. All the color in the room seemed to fade until there were just two circles of red light, glowing red light coming from Catherine's eyes. Your room? What do you mean? Leah pulled herself up to a sitting position, leaning her head against the hardwood headboard. This is my room, Catherine repeated, still smiling. I've been in this room all along. But the room upstairs, the secret bedroom, Leah started. This is the secret bedroom, Catherine told her, sitting down on the edge of the bed, her eyes still glowing. This is my bedroom. You were never in the room upstairs, Leah. Never? Leah's head spun. She closed her eyes. I really am crazy, she thought. Rain pounded against the window. Leah felt a wisp of cold air on her face, a draft from the window. She pulled the blanket up to her chin and gripped it tightly, as if it could protect her from Catherine, from what Catherine was telling her. You were never in the hidden room, Catherine explained in her soft little girl voice. You were never in the room upstairs, because I was never in the room upstairs. I never left this room. I don't understand, Leah said, opening her eyes, staring back at the pale, ghostly girl. I invaded your mind, Leah, Catherine explained in a flat, emotionless tone. I gave you visions. I made you believe you were upstairs in the secret bedroom, but that room has been boarded up all along. You were down here in your bedroom the whole time. But why? Why? Leah asked. The blanket gripped tightly up to her chin wasn't keeping out the cold fear that had swept over her entire body. That room upstairs is evil, Catherine said. Her eyes glowed bright scarlet as she said this. She floated up off the bed, hovering over Leah, the light from her eyes burning Leah's face. Leah turned her head away. Catherine eased back onto the edge of the bed. It's evil. I boarded the room up myself. 100 years ago. I did it. And that door will stay locked forever. Leah didn't say anything. She felt so sleepy. It was hard to concentrate on Catherine's words. It was hard to make sense of them. I saw you go up to the attic the first time, Catherine continued. I saw you approach the boarded-up door. I saw you listening there. At first, I tried to scare you away from it. You mean? Leah remembered those first frightening visits to the attic. Yes, the dripping blood and the metal spikes. I did that, Catherine said. I had to scare you. I had to keep you away from that room of evil. But it wasn't enough. When I saw you were determined to open the door, I invaded your mind. I made you think you were upstairs. I made you think you had opened the door, but you were down here in your bedroom the whole time. Catherine laughed, a high-pitched giggle that made her golden ringlets tumble and shake. It was obvious that she was bragging, pleased with herself, with the trick she had played on Leah. But why did you go to all that trouble? Leah asked in her husky voice. Why did you make me think I was upstairs? So you wouldn't be afraid to be in your own bedroom, Catherine replied, as if the answer were obvious. I needed you to be comfortable. I needed you to feel sorry for me, to sympathize with my sad story. I needed you to believe in me." Leah shifted uncomfortably, gripping the blanket even tighter with both hands, feeling cold, so cold she started to shiver. "What's going to happen now, Catherine?" she asked, her teeth chattering. "Now we're going to share this room," Catherine said, leaning close, "and your body." "No!" Leah tried to scream, but she felt too weak, too sleepy, too dizzy. "Now you are mine," she heard Catherine cry. And then she could feel the weight on her head, feel the heavy pressure drop down through her body, heavy, so heavy. She knew Catherine was invading her, possessing her, but Leah was too weak, too sleepy to resist. In a few seconds, Catherine had taken full possession. "How lovely," she said cheerfully in Leah's voice.